Okay. So, hello. Welcome to everyone. We're so glad that you could join us here tonight for this next part of our series about just kind of helping us all find the resources and the supports we can use in this very unusual time in our world. It's really, all of us need to come together to be able to support one another. So the way that our conversation is going to go tonight is it's really going to be a conversation between myself, I'm Rabbi Carey Brown, and Dr. Gail Krivel-Zacks, who we're so glad that you're here tonight, Dr. Gail, just about how we deal with this pandemic as parents. It's really a topic that I know many of us, any of us who have children in our households are struggling with. It's definitely something that can be a challenge. I know as a mom myself of two kids, I know that this is a hard time. So it's great to have an expert like you, Gail, on our Zoom chat tonight. Just a bit of word of introduction about Dr. Gail, and then I'll share a little bit about how tonight will work. So Dr. Gail Krivel is a registered clinical counselor who really has dedicated her career to helping children and adolescents to thrive in their own communities. And she's done a great deal of work and has tremendous experience in schools as an educator, and really has her finger on the pulse of what's going on for the lives of children and families. So we're really grateful that you're here, Gail. So we're going to have a conversation. Gail's going to first just present a little bit of information and background, and then we'll have an opportunity to ask her questions. She's going to focus on some different strategies, some real practical advice, and we'll share a little bit about some things that can be helpful for children of different ages and stages. And is even going to give us a bit of an overview of the brain and how it works, which is great. I do want to invite you, if you do have questions that you'd like to submit to Dr. Gail to answer for us tonight, to please type them in. You'll see at the bottom of your Zoom screen that there's a button for Q&A. Please submit them there. Please don't put them into the chat, and we'll try and go through them as best as we can. So I will turn it over to you, Gail, to share a little bit about what we might be thinking about at this time.
Thanks. I almost said thanks, Dr. Brown. Thanks, Rabbi Brown, for the introduction. I want to, first of all, before I even begin, just say congratulations to all the parents out there. You've been at this for 100 days, over 100 days, and you've been doing an amazing job. I also have to say there is a mosquito flying around here, and I may be distracted by it. I apologize. I've been hearing amazing things about what people have been doing in order to keep their children engaged. And I've been so impressed by their strategies. I'm learning a lot from the parents that I'm talking to. One of the things I thought we could talk about today was how they just might massage a little bit better. Keep on the same track you're on, but just massage it a little bit, because after 100 days, you probably got this pretty nailed. I just want to give a little overview. What I'm going to start with is some of my core beliefs, so you know where I'm coming from. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain and what's happening to the brain as we're going through this pandemic, and then answer some questions that people have asked me before, or if any questions come up, then I can, of course, turn my talk around so it addresses some of those larger issues from people who are in the audience right now. So my core beliefs. I believe everything we do should be informed by research. So everything I'm going to be talking about today, all the strategies, are coming from the very best practitioners in the field. If you have give me a minute to think. I didn't really plan this before, but I can send Rabbi Brown any of the references, and she can then send them off to you if you find any of them interesting. My other core belief is that people do well. People want to do well, and they do well if they can. And if they're not doing well, then something's getting in their way. Right now, it's pretty easy to call what's getting in the way the pandemic. It's social isolation and the pandemic. Every morning we wake up, there it is, we go to sleep at night, and we know it's going to be there again in the morning. It's causing our brains to react as if we're in danger all the time. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. I found that if my mantra is people do well if they can, and if they can't, something's getting in their way, is a wonderful way for me to frame every issue that's going on, because it allows me to be hopeful and to move forward from the hopefulness. The last thing is, and I'm going to talk a little bit about regulation, deregulated parents can't regulate their children. So what you need to do as parents is often just take your own temperature. How am I feeling? What's going on for me right now? And if you're feeling that you're kind of anxious, the best thing for you to do is take a step back. Unless it's a dangerous situation and you can't. So for those of you in the audience right now, Rabbi Brown is going to be my tech support, because I'm going to start to talk a little bit about the brain. I'm going to do a very simple explanation about what's going on in our brains right now. I apologize to any neuroscientists out there before I begin, because this is a very basic beginning talk about what's happening to our brains now as we're going through the pandemic and feeling the stress around us. So I want to talk about it in terms of our biological response. So Rabbi, on the first slide.
Okay. Just one moment. There it comes.
Okay. So what you have to understand about the brain is like any other organ in our body. It's biologically programmed. So the same way our lungs are biologically programmed to take air in and move air into our bodies and then out again, and our heart is programmed to move blood through our body. Our brain has been programmed in the same kind of way to deal with the world in order to protect the organism. Can we see the next slide, please? So if you think of the brain as being shaped somewhat like this, the bottom is your brainstem. And its job is just to monitor the outside world, to make sure that your basic needs are being met, that you're not hungry, that there's food. That's its job. And the next level up is the limbic system, and it monitors your emotional state. And the top part up here, which you can really move around, is higher level abstract thinking. And I like to use this model because if you have your hands up like this bottom part of the V is pretty steady here. It's not flexible at all. It's pretty hard to move it. And that's the reason it's like that is because its only job is to protect the organism. The very primitive part of the brain develops very early on. This part of the brain develops quite, there's some discussion, but in late teens, early 20s, it's when it's finished developing. Next slide, please. Oh, I want to give Dr. Bruce Carey credit for these slides. These slides are part of multiple presentations that he's done. So if your basic needs are met and life is predictable and you're feeling safe and you're feeling organized, 95% of the upper part of the brain is activated. So you have access to wanting to have relationships with people, to be able to think to the future, to be able to think abstractly, to be able to problem solve at a sophisticated level. The next slide shows you what happens when you're feeling vulnerable. when you're not feeling safe, when the world is unpredictable, like it is right now, 95% of the bottom part of your brain, that non-flexible part of your brain that's only dealing with, are you safe, is activated, and the top part is only 5% activated. So if I get the next slide. So when we're in that situation of 5% of the energy being used at this bottom brainstem level, and there's a whole lot of energy up here, that's what regulation is. And regulation actually broadly falls into two categories. Emotional regulation, which is your ability to manage your emotions, control your own emotions. When you get frustrated or angry, you don't turn into a volcano and spew lava all over the place and burn everybody who's around. When you're regulated, you're able to keep your anger, your frustration under control, and self-regulation, the ability to manage or control your body, your level of activity. So I noticed myself before this talk started, I'm in a little bit of a moving chair. And before this talk started, I recognized that I was actually moving, because that moving helps me self-regulate. Next slide, please. So again, when your basic needs are being met and life is predictable and organized, kind of pre-pandemic, you were able to access that top part of your brain, higher level problem, abstract, forward thinking part of your brain. But right now, next slide, please. Right now, we're not. We want to become more regulated. We want to stay regulated. So how do you stay regulated? All the research says this is what you need to do. You need to have a predictable pattern behavior in place. So that's why people right now, you're hearing a lot of the experts say you need to have a schedule. Put a schedule in place. You need to exercise, because when you exercise, it helps you stay in that regulated, nice, easy access, higher level functioning brain. Deep breathing. Why does deep breathing work? Because you're hearing deep breathing. Well, let's deep breathe. Why does deep breathing work? It's because this lower part of your brain, the part that's sitting on your brainstem, you can actually help it stay regulated by taking in those big breaths. So if you do it right now yourself, often people feel, did you feel it, that moment of, you feel that, Rabbi?
Yeah, breathing is, sometimes we forget to breathe.
Yeah, we often forget to breathe. And when you do breathe, you get that, the lower part of your brain goes, oh, I'm safe. There's no danger around. You can actually trick it. And one of the other things is you have safe relationships. Safe relationships allow the brain to feel the functioning of the mind and the brain, to feel that it's in a situation where there is no danger. So next slide, please. So when you become dysregulated, what happens? You have chemicals that are released in your body. They have a really important function if you really are in danger. They shut your brain down. They allow your heart to start to beat faster. They move your circulation to your fingers and your extremities so you can run. Your heartbeat increases. That's what happens when you become dysregulated. We've all had that feeling. When you become dysregulated, the more dysregulated you become, the less access you have to the higher level functioning of your brain. So the strategies, if you can go to the next slide, the strategies that I'm going to give you, maybe we can just skip this one. The strategies that I'm going to be giving you are all based on the research that talks about how you can make yourself feel safer, how you can structure the environment so your children feel safer. So if you think about it, if you're regulated, if the bottom part of your brain is regulated, the brainstem, then you're able to have that energy that allows you to relate to the other people who are living in your home, to be able to build relationships with school virtually, and to be able to reason and reflect and have that higher level problem solving. That's very, very simple explanation of what happens with respect to regulation and self-regulation and brain function.
Fantastic. Is that the last slide?
That's the last slide. So did you have any questions about that, Rabbi Brown?
Well, I do have a few questions. So, I mean, one of the things, and first of all, that was really interesting just about how the science of the brain and the biology of the brain really impacts so much of our behavior without us even thinking about it. One of the things that you spoke about was about having predictability and how having a schedule
Mm-hmm.
helps to bring some predictability to someone's life. I'm wondering if you could share maybe a little bit about some strategies for setting a schedule of what makes a predictable schedule for a child. I mean, I can imagine, meal times and routine of bedtime and things like that, but are there other things you can suggest?
Well, one of the questions that I got, this question was a real question that came to me. I understand the importance of the schedule. I've put the schedule in place. I've put it on the fridge. I've talked to everybody about it. And my family is calling me a dictator. What am I supposed to do? So there are a couple of points there. The first one being this is not the conversation I had with the parent, but what I heard was, I did this. I put this in place. I put it on the fridge. I created the schedule. And the challenge with doing that is, especially if you're working with teenagers who are really struggling right now, because part of the natural development of a teenager is this, they call it the second individuation. It's not that they're turning into 2-year-olds, but developmentally, they are beginning to separate from the family unit. And developmentally, they're looking for autonomy. They're looking for peer relations. And they're looking for a sense of competency. And when, as the parent, you put the schedule up there, you are in fact making them feel like a baby. When you say, well, this is when we'll go, so this will be when we start to shut down. And they're going, well, babies have bedtimes. I'm a teenager. I don't have a bedtime. And so one of the first things that I suggested to this parent was that they use more of a collaborative approach, where you sit down at the end of every day and you put the schedule together the next day, talking about what you think is important and what you think is not important, and have certain parts of the day that are important to you. So for example, you might want to have dinner together. It's very important for you to have dinner together. Well, I think it's important to explain, first of all, for you to be clear about why you want to have dinner together. Because you as the parent want to maintain some of the normalcy that came before the pandemic. Okay, then you need to share that with your children. So that's the first thing. It's collaboratively work with people in order, the people in your home, to put a schedule together.
Mm-hmm.
And then to recognize when you're putting the schedule together that just because you work in the morning well, doesn't mean that everybody else in your house works in the morning well. So it's more about what has to be done that day and who's going to do it and when they're going to do it. And then another part, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that parents talk about in a second, I'll talk about that, is then not micromanage. If they said that they're going to get their reading done before they go to bed, then okay. And then the next day when you look at the schedule and you go, okay, what worked, what didn't work, you go, well, what happened here? I mean, I'm not angry. It's really important to say I'm not angry, but you didn't get some of the things you needed to get done. What can we do now to fix this problem? Because it's just a problem. Any problem can be fixed.
Hmm. Yeah. I guess a couple of questions from that. So one is, um, it sounds like you're suggesting so like a daily check-in on the schedule. So is that yeah, so
Mhm.
to see how things are going. And it also sounds like there, needs to be a lot of flexibility in how we understand these sorts of schedules that I think there's a tension there sometimes of, the schedule is so that we know what's going on and we have a structure and,
Yeah,
we have a predictable thing that's going to happen every day. But with the flexibility to say, if it doesn't go that way, it's not the end of the
exactly.
world and we can
Exactly. And
reevaluate.
everybody's schedule's different.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the reason of having a schedule is to have a routine.
Hmm.
Because, I mean, let's face it, our lives don't change that much. And you must have seen that meme that went around, that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday with the mon to cut off. It's just day, 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 day.
Hmm.
So right now it's more about the routine of what somebody does when they wake up in the morning. So it's not necessarily the time you wake up, but when you wake up, and if you're in a home where the routine pre-pandemic was that everybody made their bed, everybody came down and had breakfast, and everybody put their dishes away, then that's still part of your schedule, but it doesn't have to all occur at 9 o'clock or at 8 o'clock or at 7 o'clock. But that's everyone's routine, including your own routine. As a parent, it's really important that you carve out a routine for yourself.
Hmm. Yeah. Another question I've been, hearing asked a lot from people I've talked to, other parents, people in the congregation, is about just dealing with our own fear.
Mm,
As adults and as people in this world, there's so much anxiety and worry, and how much to let our kids into seeing that is healthy or not, and how much does our fears, even if we don't talk about it, how much is that coming off to our children? How do we help them to kind of feel safe even when we are experiencing fear?
really big one. It's a it's a huge question. I think that let's break it down a little bit. So when parents are talking about their fears, there are multiple fears they could be talking about. They might be talking about the fear of the unknown, their personal fear about the unknown. Well, I think that as a parent, what you first have to do is begin to address some of those feelings yourself. So um, some of them are easier and some of them are harder. So we began, maybe before people got on, talking about school and what's school going to look like and how am I going to deal with the issues of school and what's re-entry going to look like. So I think that you need to break down this, as parents, you need to break down this big umbrella of fear and look at the individual spokes. And then once you've looked at the individual spokes, decide, okay, what can I deal with right now? Well, there are some things you could deal with right now. So let's say one of your fears is, what's reentry of school going to look like? I'm worried for myself. I'm worried for my child. What's the reentry of school going to look like? So then you need to break that down even more for yourself, and your child's feeling the same thing as well, which is, and you can acknowledge that, I'm a little bit worried about what school's going to look like. And I know you're a little bit worried about what school's going to look like too. Well, a couple of things. I know that nobody's going to ask you to go back to school unless schools are safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to let you go back to school unless schools are safe. So how am I going to make sure schools are safe? Well, I'm going to have just one or two, and this is for any fears, one or two sources of good information that I'm going to follow. So Bonnie Henry right now, I think that she is doing an amazing job of both telling us what's going on and then the strategies that we can use. I think that one of the things you can do is normally if you have issues and you're concerned about things at school, this is to you, Rabbi Brown, what would you do?
If my kids were having issues at school,
Yeah,
yeah, I'd tell them to come talk to me, to talk to their teachers, to
exactly.
share what they're feeling. Yeah.
Exactly. So I still think the same opportunities are there. I think parents just need to have one mantra, which is my job is to keep you safe. I'm going to keep you safe. The second thing you need to do is, well, I have questions too. How can we answer these questions? We can answer these questions by going to the teachers and going to the schools.
Mm-hmm.
I think some things that you can do as a parent is ensure that your school has put some things into place. So you want to make sure your school has maintained relationship with your child. Are they checking in? And your child is keeping relationship with the school. Then it's not an unknown of school, then it becomes the teacher, the principal. I
Mm-hmm.
think another thing you can do is ask the schools, do they have a plan in place? So for example, around curriculum, what do we know? We know right now we don't know anything really. We're building this plane as we're flying it. But what we suspect is that the anxiety level of children is higher around germs, around death, and around sickness.
Mm-hmm.
So does the school have things in place, simple things like if your child is going to be going into grade 7, where they're going to be studying ancient civilizations, are they going to be talking about bubonic plague?
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe they need to be rethinking that. And I know schools are rethinking that. Are they, because are children going to be going into the same grade they were in, or are they going to be going into a different grade? If they're going into a different grade, can you set up a little bit of matchmaking? Has the school set up a little bit of matchmaking where you would be meeting some students who are going to be going into your new grade? Can you set up some lunchtime groups? So when kids come to school the next year, they're going to know who they're going to be with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that would be one thing around school.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other fears that people are having are just again about reentry. How do I do this?
Mm-hmm.
It's so confusing for me. So last Wednesday, when the Premier and Bonnie Henry were on, Dr. Bonnie Henry were on, they were saying, well, you can begin to include other people in your social circle. Great, but where's the how?
Mm-hmm.
How do I do that? Well, again, you just need to take a step back. You don't need to do it tomorrow. And I think she did a good job of answering those questions. Well, one family meets with another family, and then you get a 2-family bubble.
Mm-hmm.
We need those kind of clear answers that are being given, usually the next day by the experts.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that's really interesting is that we've almost become really good at this stage of the pandemic, right? We
Yes.
kind of have figured out how to self-isolate in our homes and deal with what, just only going to the grocery store if we need to. But I think you're right that the next something new and different, all of a sudden the same sort of
Well,
anxiety
that's
is
what's
happening
happening.
with
All of a
kids.
sudden, if you think of your brain again, you're now moving down to the lower stem of your brain because you're not feeling safe, and you're afraid your kids aren't going to be safe, and so then you can't do this higher level problem solving anymore. But you're a parent. Your job is to do this higher level problem solving. So you're getting, and then once you get those feelings of being unsafe, it's physically impossible. In the same way you can't stop yourself from breathing, you can't make the lower part of your brain react any differently than it was. When it feels under siege, when it doesn't feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
it just doesn't, it activates this lower part because that's its job. Its job is to make you safe. Your lungs' job is to breathe. Your heart's job is to push blood through your system. This part of your brain is to keep you safe.
Right.
So that's when you need to do those same kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
You need to take a breath. You need to do the yoga. You need to do predictable activities. So to go back to the schedule, one of the things you need to build into your schedule is those predictable physical activity times while you're at home. It's part of your schedule, and you can get your children to become part of it. Like do a Zumba class. I mean, there's so many classes online right now. Do a Zumba class together. Do something fun together. Or one of the things people are baking like crazy, and particularly bread. Why are people breaking bread together? Sorry. Why are people making bread? Because it's predictable. The motion of it is very predictable. Making bread is very soothing, the kneading of the bread. And the interesting thing is that, and it's good for me, maybe for other people too, is that eating starch actually helps metabolize cortisol.
Hmm. Oh, so it's
So
good. I
that's
could eat all of those
Yeah, so
breads.
that's what's happening. Your body is actually moving you towards what you need, which is starch.
Hmm. That's really great. Um, so another question, and just a reminder, if people have other questions they want to ask too, I just put it in the Q&A button down below. Um, so I feel like I'm getting a lot from my kids and lots of kids and teens I've been talking to in the congregation is just disappointment, right? Of
Mm,
all the things that they're missing out on. So a big thing is, my kids' summer camp announced that they were canceled last week or 2 weeks ago. There's other camps have started saying that. Kids who are not able to have a grade 7 graduation or a grade 12 graduation or start their university years as they wanted, all these different things that are being kind of taken away from the kids.
mm, mhm.
What are good techniques for parents to help kids process their disappointment?
The first thing is acknowledge it. Just say, you're right. This is really sad. And those feelings you're having, you they're legitimate feelings. So, but what can we do? We have to move forward. So what can we do instead? Yes, you can't go to summer camp, but what can we do instead? What can we do in the short term? Well, right now, we can, right now, what we can do is you're not able to go to camp. What's fun about camp? So talk about what was fun about camp. Well, I get to be with my friends and I get to do great activities and I kind of get a break from just being home.
From you, mom and dad?
So you'll go, okay, so let's problem solve around that. What can we do that would be fun for you to do that allows you to do those kinds of things? Well, we don't know what's going to be open. Just be really honest. We don't know what's going to be open. We don't know if pools are going to be open. We don't know what's going to be open. And then just give it to them. You don't have to solve all those problems. Children are great problem solvers. What can we do? I'm open to it. What can we do? Let's have a Zoom meeting with your friends and some parents, and let's just brainstorm some things that we can do that will be fun. Not as much fun at camp, I get that, but it still will allow you to do the things you want to do, which is be with your friends and do fun activities and be away from me.
Hmm.
Or be independent.
That's
I
actually a
think
very interesting question about independence. I'm finding with my own kids that they've actually gained a lot of independence during this pandemic, that they've, um, stepped up into doing some things on their own at home and feeling a little more free to walk around the neighborhood and things like that. And some of it's just their age. It happens to be this
yeah.
is, when it's natural. But um, what's your sense about, kids and independence and what's best for them as they're dealing with this. I mean, I'm thinking about summer, certainly, but just in general.
Tell me a little bit more about what you mean by independence.
Um, so some of it is physical independence of, kind of letting them wander a little bit, kind of just be kids, not to hover as helicopter parents
Yeah.
as much about, where they are at every given second, as feeling safe in our neighborhood, etc. Um, and and then I guess, with that comes that sense of wanting to protect them of, this, like, there's this scary invisible virus that's out there, and if I let them go, I don't know what they're touching and who they're interacting with, and how do I kind of deal with those two
That's going to be a really interesting problem for an issue as we move forward. How are we going to ensure that our kids are safe? I think one of the ways is it being really honest about, and I think kids are understanding this now. So what I was thinking about just then was when the pandemic first happened and the response of the medical community was to us, wash your hands. And we're going, people are dying, and you're saying that the thing that I can do is wash my hands. There's a mismatch here. This is not making me feel safe. My lower part of my brain is going, no, 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 there has to be something more. And then the medical community realized that this was not really working. And then they explained why, which was if you wash your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds, you actually kill the virus. And then they had all those cute little cartoons and what happens with the soap. And all of a sudden, everybody started washing their hands. I think that if we say it over and over and over again to kids, that this is what you have to do, they will do that, because they are also anxious about this real problem that they've lived through. For us, for me, I've never lived through anything like this. Never. Antibiotics, the polio was way over. I didn't ever live through a time when germs were dangerous. So I didn't really treat germs as dangerous. I mean, people who had OCD treated germs as if they were dangerous, and now they're all laughing, going, see, I was right. So I think that that's what you have to do. You have to trust your kids. To get back to your question, you have to trust your kids. Another question that I got from a mother of a 3-year-old was their 3-year-old, and in fact, regressed. Mm-hmm. With respect to independence. All of a sudden, they do not want to be out of eyesight of their mom or their dad. This was a 3-year-old who was very independent. First thing is, this is really normal, which is what I told the parent. And then we chatted and we talked about germs, and the 3-year-old was able to say that germs were like SpongeBob. She imagined them like SpongeBob, and they were just waiting outside the door. And anytime her mom and dad went outside the door, the germ was going to just absorb them like SpongeBob. Mm. So 2 parts of that story. One is you really have to listen to your kids. It's not so much about how you talk to your kids, but how you listen to your kids. So what we realized was we had to do the same things that you would do for any person who has separation anxiety. Children don't have a real sense of time. So set a timer and just get farther and farther from them for longer and longer periods of time. Mm-hmm. That gets back to your initial question, which was, I'm feeling really anxious. Are my kids feeling that anxiety? Yes. They are. They're the barometer. However, it's okay. If you weren't feeling anxious, they would think there was something the matter. because how can this thing be happening and mom not be anxious and dad not be anxious? So what you need to say is, yeah, I am worried about the larger world, but my job is to make sure you're safe, and you are safe. We've made sure you're safe. And that's all you have to say. Acknowledging that you're worried too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. Um, Switching topics a little bit.
Okay.
Kids, I think what something I've noticed in my own kids is that they're really missing their friends.
Mm.
And we try and arrange little Zoom meetings for them to chat, but it's not the same. Um, what are ways to help kids with those kind of feelings about missing their relationships, about helping them feel connected more broadly, not just to their household, but to a broader community?
It's challenging. I think that most parents are doing exactly what they can do with the tools that we have. One thing is to say, you're not going to lose your friends. Your friends will be there. Your friends will be there. But here, what strategies that we use with Zoom or with some alternatives to Zoom? There are some, and I can send some sites, some game playing sites where kids can play games. Unfortunately, the only way that they can connect right now, well, it's changing a little bit, but let's assume that you have to only connect through Zoom, through technology. There are lots of ways to share it, share experiences together, and that's what you want to do. Have sleepovers together with Zoom, with FaceTime. Take a cooking class together with Zoom and with FaceTime, where you're both log on to the same time for teenagers and you're both cooking the same things at the same time, so you have a shared experience. It's not so much necessarily just talking to each other, because although teenagers do talk a lot, it's also the shared experience of spending the time together doing a joint activity. So I think that that's really important to continue to do and find ways for them to have that joint time together separate from parents.
That's great. That's great. You made me think of another topic, which is really a struggle right now with kids, is screen time. Kids are just, constantly on the screens, and some of it is, they have to be for school. They need that for the social connection you were just talking about, and staying connected with grandparents and other people in their lives. What are you hearing from people? What are your recommendations about what we do about the kids on the screens?
First thing is, we just have to let everything we knew pre-pandemic go. It's just got to go. The only way that we can connect with the world right now is screen time. So all that stuff about everything, it's damaging your brains, all the information that we had previously, whether or not it's true, it's irrelevant, because right now, relationship is key. So that's the first thing. Let that kind of fear go. The questions I'm getting are about how do I want my children to have breaks from screen time. And when I ask them, okay, so you want them to have a break from screen time, what are you asking them to do instead? And it's usually a less preferred activity. So if you want to get your children off screens, then you have to provide something that is more preferred. And for most children, the preferred activity is spending time with you, doing something with their parents. They really, children, teenagers enjoy that. So into your schedule, when you build it, both for your regulation and for their regulation, build in that Zumba time or the playing the Uno time or doing something fun, a joint activity together. So there's a reason, a motivation to get off their screens.
Yeah, That's, I think that's very true. I mean, the kids, they do want to be, they want our attention. They want, that connection and
Exactly.
it's special.
And if when you're building your schedule, you explain to them in it because you want to build empathy with your children. So you're explaining why you feel this way and what you know is best with yourself. And you can do the whole thing about the brain and how the brain regulates, and you'll be surprised how much they already know because it's a subject they cover in school. You say, so I need help to break away from my work and to keep my brain fresh. And I know that you also physiologically need that same kind of break. So let's build it into the day, and you can help me do something kind of fun, like whatever it is that involves a repetitive, predictable, rhythmic activity.
Hmm. Fantastic. Um, I was just chatting with a friend of mine in Toronto about how he was doing and his kids, and he has teenagers. So these are different stage than my kids. And he said, we're all doing great. He says, but I never see my kids because we're on like opposite sleep schedules. Said they're up all hours of the night. They're having the
Yeah,
time of their lives. They hang out with their friends.
yeah.
And he said, we're actually doing all fine, but he said it's very, very different and strange. And I don't know if this is a common thing of teenagers kind of living like nocturnally and what's going on.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's come up, if you have suggestions of how to deal with that.
Well, yes, because I've been hearing my child turn into a vampire.
Hmm.
They're up all night. So different parents have different concerns. Some parents' concerns are around the fact that they're afraid that their children are going to get into this routine, their teenagers are going to get into this routine, and they are never going to go back to their regular routine. I don't really think that's a fear. I don't think that's going to happen.
Mm.
The other concern that they have is they're not getting their schoolwork done.
Hmm.
They're not, but it's not a reality. It's just a concern because for most parents, you do your work before you go to bed. If everything's getting done, then then that's not a concern. So I think that for parents, the first thing they have to determine is what's a concern.
Hmm.
Is the concern that it's really important for me to go back to our previous conversation? It's really important for me as a parent, we eat family dinner together. It's one time where we want to eat family dinner together and they just are not eating dinner because they've just eaten lunch. Okay, well, then that's a problem that you can collaboratively solve, building empathy with your child by saying, it's really important to me that we as a family spend this time together. How can we make this work? So first break it down. And then I think also understand teenage development. Teenage development is this need for autonomy. And again, like a 2-year-old, for any teenagers who are listening, I'm not comparing you to two-year-olds. But what I am saying is that there are very few things that children can really control and teenagers can really control. When they go to bed, when they go to sleep, and when they eat are things that they can control. So allow them that
Hmm.
because that's part of their development. That's part of their normal development that would be pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and will still continue post-pandemic.
Hmm. Yeah. Are there any l- kind of long-term concerns that you have about children and things to be looking out for? I mean, you said, about teenagers, you're not worried about their sleep schedule and their vampire schedules as a thing, but are there other things that you are concerned about with kids during this time?
Well, I think everyone is wondering how the levels of anxiety are they going to be long term? We don't know. So I think that the people that I'm listening to, Dr. Bruce Perry, Dr. Stuart Albion, are saying let's just, it won't do us any harm if we assume that anxiety levels are going to be higher and we put some practices in place that will decrease anxiety. So let's keep that sense of relationship high, both to the school, to the teachers, to their friends, to ourselves. Let's acknowledge when children are afraid. Let's acknowledge that they're afraid, and then do a little bit of curious investigation about what's going to happen or what's happening now. Like this is it might be all or nothing thinking. And that gets down to some of the fears you had initially talked about. For parents and for kids, it's all or nothing. If I don't get this done right now, my life is ruined. Or if they don't get their, the SATs need to be written and they need to be in by this date, because if they're not in and they're not in by this date, then they're never going to go to university. Well, that's not the case. Everyone recognizes that this time we're living in will change things in the near future.
Yeah.
And so with children, we need to be listening to them to see where their thinking is. And are they stuck in negative thinking? Are they stuck in all or nothing thinking? Something probably has gone awry in that thinking process. And as the adults in their lives, we just need, and that's what we would expect if there was trauma or anxiety, as you know, and we would just deal with it as it arose, listening to kids.
Yeah, yeah. This is, I guess, not specifically a parenting question, but more a question about our own parents. A lot of us are dealing with the anxiety of having parents who are in the age group who, are high risk. And for those who are fortunate enough to live in the same city, it's about do we want to see them distantly, and how do we balance that? And for those of us who have parents who live far away, how do we maintain those relationships? And the sadness about we might not be able to see each other for a very long time. Do you have any suggestions, strategies, how to kind of help those multi-generational relationships and our own connection with our parents?
I've been hearing, and again, we're building this plane as we're flying it. So I'm hearing the concerns. Other specialists in this area are hearing the concerns. And in addition to what you're talking about, the other thing I'm hearing is touch. We're not able to touch those people we love.
Yeah.
So I think my response is similar to the one with children. Right now, we just have to do as many shared and joint activities as we possibly can with our extended families. That's really the best we can do right now. And I know that a lot of families over Mother's Day did social distancing, Mother's Day dinners, Mother's Day lunches. They came over and there was a conversation before with their children, which was, we have to keep everybody safe. So we're going to do, when you want to hug grandma, hug yourself, and grandma's going to hug herself. And you'll get that feeling of touch. It's not the same. I know it's not the same, but we have to keep everybody safe. And those are ideas that I'm getting from other parents, from other families. And if you think about it, it allows relationships to still take place. You're using your higher level functioning, and everybody feels safe. And that's what you want, is everybody to feel safe, because as soon as you don't feel safe, you get into that place where you just can't make any decisions.
Right. Yeah. And I think, one of the things I've noticed with my own kids is, they really, truly, as most kids are, they are very resilient. Like, once you kind of help them to understand the parameters of a visit or whatever, like they get it, and they feel a bit more in control if they know what's happening going into the situation.
Yeah. And if you explain why, it's really important to explain why, like the washing your hands and the virus. That all of a sudden that made sense. 1 second, you said something, can't remember. it triggered a thought and I've lost it.
Oh, okay. It's okay. Um, so I guess one other question, we touched on this a little bit, but just tachlis, like some real good recommendations. Everyone is very anxious about the summer, not just about the anxiety of what they can't do, but how to actually fill the time of the summer without camps or camps as we know them. Do you have any strategies for, what we should do with our kids during the summer?
I, I mean, I'm no, I, I really don't because I don't know what's going to be available.
Hmm.
Uh, will and and also I don't know. There's going to be this new world because children were away at camp and parents could work.
Hmm.
Now it's going to be parents are going to be at home working, children are going to be not at camp. What are we going to be able to do? Hopefully, we will come up with some ideas. I think that everybody's just going to have um, to be creative. I know that I don't really have an answer for this one because I don't know what's going to be available. I mean, there are some depending on how much social interaction we have, there's a possibility that all those teenagers who would be working in the camps will be available. It's kind of a opportunity of crisis to be able to take a family, the children in one family out and be able to do activities with them. They'll be walking or maybe riding a bike. You wouldn't be going on the bus, but they'll be able to in fact be private day camp counselors.
Hmm.
That's one possibility that's available. I think that it's just such a strange time. I I wish I had an easy answer for that one. I don't.
Hmm. Hmm. I do think, though, one of the things that you just said sparked something in me about how people are also looking for opportunities to give and to help.
Mm,
So, we're seeing that a lot in the synagogue, whether it's, people who want to deliver meals or make phone calls to check in on people or sew masks or whatever it is.
yeah.
People want to be able to do something productive that helps others. And so, we can see that, it is the crisis that was the catalyst that maybe bumped people into action.
Yes.
But I think you're right that there are all these opportunities that are out there that we never saw before. And that's really a beautiful thing.
It is, and how people are stepping up. That was one of the you don't want to silver linings. That was one of the silver linings. You don't want to say benefits, but one of the silver linings of this time is just how generous people are and how kind people are and how they're demonstrating that in a daily.
Yeah.
And when something happens that's not kind, the outrage that is palatable when people do something that's not kind.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I
Absolutely.
remember what I was going to say. And this goes back to it's kind of a tangential roundabout. When you were talking about children and anxiety, one of the things that happens, especially with younger children who don't have a really good sense of time, is many parents are having CNN run in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And we know as adults that once we see a situation happen on the news, and then we see it again and again and again, it's really only one situation. Younger children who don't have that ability to understand that see that one situation on the news, and then they see it again, they think it's happening a second time. They see it again, they think it's happening a third time. So it's really important to turn off your television because your children are not understanding at the same level you are about what's happening in the news.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's definitely such good practical advice. I think that, that it can, um, there's so much that they absorb in the background. We don't even realize that they're listening
Exactly.
into our conversation and they're listening to the news on the radio or the TV in the background. And Yeah, it all it all seeps right in.
Yeah, they're just little barometers. So what I'd like to leave people with, because I can see the time's getting short, is that if they're worried about school or school issues, phone your school. Find out what's actually happening there and find out if they have a plan that's going to be in place. Because once you know that and you trust them that they're going to keep your children safe, then you'll feel safe.
Hmm. That's fantastic. It's great advice. I love everything that you brought to us, Dr. Gail, about just our own regulation and how that helps our children, and that message of safety that, as you were saying, that, my job is to keep you safe and you're safe, and that's what we give them, and that is just everything. So for their own development and safety and everything. So thank you for this gift of teaching us that, and for your time. I'm so grateful for you to be with us. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciated it.
Wonderful. So good night, everyone. I'm going to end the session now. We have recorded this, so if you want to pass this along to any friends, we're happy to share it with you as well. Okay, take care, everyone, and stay safe. Bye.
Bye.